The boy reached into his pocket. He pulled out an envelope. And Simon Cowell stood up. America's Got Talent. The Pasadena Civic Auditorium. Season 18. Another Tuesday night. Another packed house. 3,000 people in the audience. 4 judges at the red desk. Cameras rolling. The familiar rhythm of talent television, singers, dancers, acrobats, magicians, all chasing the same dream. Act number 47 walked onto the stage. A boy. 12 years old? Small for his age. Dark hair, neat button-up shirt, hands shoved deep in his pockets. He walked to center stage with the careful steps of someone trying not to run away. Host Terry Crews greeted him with his usual warmth. "Welcome to America's Got Talent. What's your name, young man?" "Ethan Miller." His voice was quiet, almost swallowed by the massive auditorium. "And where are you from, Ethan?" "Nashville, Tennessee." "Nashville. Music City. So you're here to sing for us?" Ethan nodded but didn't smile. His hands stayed in his pockets. His eyes darted to the judges' table, then away, then back again. Simon leaned forward slightly at the judge's desk, that familiar expression of professional curiosity on his face. He'd seen thousands of contestants walk onto this stage. Nervous kids. Confident adults. People who thought they were ready and people who definitely weren't. After 18 seasons, he could usually tell within seconds which category they fell into. Ethan looked terrified. But there was something else in his eyes. Something Simon couldn't quite identify yet. "What are you going to sing for us?" Terry asked. Ethan took a breath. "I'm going to sing Somewhere Over the Rainbow." A ripple went through the audience. It was a beautiful song, but also incredibly challenging. And it had been done on this show dozens of times. Simon's expression shifted slightly, not quite skeptical, but careful. "That's a big song," Howie said from the judges' table. "Are you ready for it?" "I think so," Ethan said. Then he paused. "But before I sing, there's something I need to do first." He pulled his right hand from his pocket. He was holding an envelope. Old, worn at the edges, the kind that had been carried around for a long time. Terry Crews glanced at the judges, uncertain. This wasn't part of the usual format. Contestants performed, then judges gave feedback. They didn't do things first. But Ethan was already opening the envelope with trembling fingers. Simon Cowell has watched thousands of talents, but none of them started like this. The 12-year-old boy opened something before his performance, and Simon had to stand up from the judges' table. Simon's posture changed. He sat up straighter. His eyes locked on the envelope in Ethan's hands. Something in the boy's face, that mixture of grief and determination, triggered an instinct Simon had learned to trust over 2 decades of television. "Ethan," Simon said, his voice cutting clearly across the auditorium. "What's in the envelope?" Ethan pulled out a single piece of paper. Handwritten. The kind of careful handwriting that comes from someone who knows they are writing something important. "It's a letter," Ethan said, his voice cracking. "From my dad. He wrote it before he died. 6 months ago. And he told me, he made me promise, that if I ever got to stand on this stage, I had to read it out loud before I sang." The auditorium went completely silent. 3,000 people holding their breath. The other judges, Howie, Heidi, Sophia, all leaned forward. But Simon was already moving. He pushed his chair back and stood up. Not dramatically. Not for show. Just stood up. Because sitting behind a desk suddenly felt wrong. "Ethan," Simon said, and his voice had changed completely. No trace of the sharp judge, just a man talking to a boy. "You don't have to read that if you don't want to. This is your audition. You can do it however you need to." "No," Ethan said, shaking his head, clutching the letter tighter. "I promised him. He made me promise." Simon looked at the other judges. Heidi had tears in her eyes. Howie was gripping the edge of the desk. Sophia had her hand over her mouth. Simon made a decision. He stepped out from behind the judge's desk and walked toward the stage. The audience gasped. In 18 seasons of America's Got Talent, Simon Cowell had never left the judge's table during an audition. Never. The cameras scrambled to follow him. The director in the control room was shouting into headsets. Nobody knew what was happening. Simon climbed the stairs to the stage. He walked across to where Ethan stood, small and alone under the bright lights. He stopped about 3 feet away, giving the boy space but offering presence. "Read it," Simon said quietly. "If that's what you need to do, then read it. We're listening." Simon stopped the show. No one knew what was happening. Ethan's hands were shaking so badly the paper rattled. He took a breath and started to read. "Dear Ethan." His voice cracked on his own name. "If you're reading this on the America's Got Talent stage, it means you did it. You got there. I knew you would. I always knew." The boy paused, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand, then continued. "I'm sorry I won't be there to watch you. I'm sorry I won't get to see you grow up and become the person I know you're going to be. The cancer took that from both of us. But here's what it can't take. It can't take the fact that you're the bravest person I've ever known." Simon stood completely still, his arms at his sides, his face showing something the audience had never seen before, raw, unguarded emotion. "When you were 8 years old," Ethan read, his voice steadier now, finding strength in his father's words. "We watched America's Got Talent together every Tuesday night. You told me that someday you'd be on that stage. And I believed you. Not because you were the best singer in the world, though you're pretty good, but because you had something more important than talent. You had heart." The audience was crying. Not scattered sniffles, but open weeping. 3,000 strangers bearing witness to a father's final message to his son. "I want you to know something, buddy. When you walk onto that stage, you're not alone. I'm there with you. In every note you sing. In every breath you take. In the courage it took to stand up there even though you're scared." Ethan's voice broke completely. He couldn't continue. He stood there, letter in his trembling hands, tears streaming down his face, unable to speak. Simon stepped closer. He reached out and gently took the letter from Ethan's hands, not taking it away, just helping to hold it steady so the boy could keep reading. "You want to finish it?" Simon asked softly. Ethan nodded. Together, Simon holding the bottom of the paper and Ethan holding the top, they read the final paragraph. "So sing, Ethan. Sing like I'm sitting in the front row cheering for you. Sing like your mom is crying happy tears in the audience, because she will be. Sing like you're not scared, even though I know you are. And when you're done, when the judges give you their feedback, remember this, I'm already proud of you. Nothing they say can add to that or take away from it. You're my son. You're my heart. And I love you. Forever. Dad." Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this performance is still ahead. Simon handed the letter back to Ethan. The boy folded it carefully and tucked it back into the envelope, then into his shirt pocket, over his heart. "Your dad," Simon said, his voice rough with emotion. "What was his name?" "Michael. Michael Miller. Michael Miller was right about you. You are brave. Walking out here, standing under these lights, reading that letter in front of all these people, that takes more courage than most adults will ever have." Simon turned to face the audience, breaking another rule, speaking directly to them rather than staying in the performance space. "Folks, we're about to hear Ethan sing. And I want you to understand something. This isn't just an audition anymore. This is a son keeping a promise to his father. So when he sings, we're not judging him. We're witnessing something sacred." He looked back at Ethan. "Are you ready?" Ethan nodded. Simon walked back to the judge's table, but he didn't sit down. He stood beside his chair, arms crossed, every bit of his attention focused on the small boy center stage. The music started. The opening notes of "Somewhere Over the Rainbow." Ethan opened his mouth and sang. His voice was clear. Pure. Not perfect. There were moments where emotion made it waver, where grief cracked through, but it was real. Honest. Every note carried the weight of a promise kept. Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high. Simon's jaw clenched. His eyes glistened. The legendary judge who had built his career on brutal honesty and harsh critiques stood at his desk with tears running down his face. "There's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby." Heidi was openly sobbing. Sophia had both hands over her mouth. Howie's eyes were closed, just listening. In the audience, a woman in the front row, Ethan's mother, Sarah Miller, was crying so hard she could barely breathe. Beside her sat an empty seat with a small framed photo of Michael Miller propped on it. He was there. In the way that matters. Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue. Ethan's voice grew stronger. The fear fell away. He wasn't performing anymore. He was talking to his father. Through song. Through courage. Through the promise he'd made. "And the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true." The final note hung in the air for a long moment. Then silence. Complete, reverent silence. Then the auditorium exploded. 3,000 people on their feet. Screaming. Crying. Applauding so loud it shook the walls. The judges were all standing. Even Simon, who never stood during auditions, was on his feet, applauding with everyone else. But Ethan wasn't looking at the audience. He was looking at that empty seat in the front row. At his father's picture. And he was smiling through his tears. Backstage, producers were begging him to continue with protocol, but he didn't. The applause eventually quieted. Ethan stood center stage, wiping his eyes, waiting for feedback. Simon looked at the other judges. "I think I should go first," he said. They nodded immediately. Simon leaned forward on the desk, his voice carrying across the auditorium. "Ethan, I've been doing this for a very long time. I've heard thousands of singers. I've given feedback to some of the biggest stars in the world. And I can tell you with absolute certainty, what you just did was more important than any technical perfection could ever be." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Your father's letter said you have heart." He was right. But he left something out. "You also have talent. Real talent. The kind that comes from someplace deep and true. You're 12 years old and you just taught this entire auditorium, including me, something about courage." Simon stood up again. "I'm not supposed to do this yet. We're supposed to hear from all the judges first. But I don't care about protocol right now." He walked toward the golden buzzer. That gleaming red button that could change everything. That could send a contestant straight to the live shows, bypassing weeks of competition. "Your dad made you promise to read that letter," Simon said. "I'm making you a promise right now." His hand slammed down on the golden buzzer. Golden confetti exploded from the ceiling. Music blared. Lights flashed. The audience went absolutely insane. Ethan fell to his knees on the stage, overwhelmed. Simon climbed the stairs again, walked to the boy, and helped him to his feet. Then he did something he'd never done in 18 seasons of this show. He hugged him. Not a quick, awkward, camera-ready hug. A real one. The kind an adult gives a child who needs to know they're not alone. "You kept your promise," Simon said into Ethan's ear, quiet enough that only the boy and the microphones caught it. "Your dad would be so proud." Ethan's mother rushed the stage. Security let her through. She grabbed her son and they held each other while golden confetti rained down around them and 3,000 people cheered and cried and celebrated. But what happened next, no one in the theater, or watching at home, could ever forget. After the show, Simon did something unprecedented. He asked to speak with Ethan and his mother privately in his dressing room. Sarah Miller was hesitant. "We don't want to take up your time, Mr. Cowell. You've already done so much. Please," Simon said. "Just 5 minutes." They sat in his dressing room, Simon, Ethan, and Sarah. The noise of the continuing production outside felt distant. "That letter," Simon said. Your husband knew exactly what his son needed to hear. As a father myself, He stopped, composed himself. I understand now what he was doing. He was giving Ethan armor. Something to carry on to that stage that would make him unbreakable. Sarah nodded, tears falling again. Michael spent 2 weeks writing that letter. He rewrote it a dozen times. He wanted every word to be perfect. Simon reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. He handed it to Sarah. This is my personal assistant's contact information. When Ethan comes to the live shows, and he will, I want to make sure you have everything you need. Travel, accommodation, anything. But more than that. Simon looked at Ethan. I want to help you record that song. Professionally. And I want all the proceeds to go to cancer research in your father's name. Ethan's eyes went wide. Really? Really? Your father gave you a gift tonight. That letter. That courage. I want to help you turn it into something that helps other families facing what you faced. 3 months later, Ethan Miller's recording of Somewhere Over the Rainbow was released. All proceeds went to the Michael Miller Memorial Cancer Research Fund. It raised over $2 million in its first year. The original letter, the one Ethan read on stage that night, now sits in a frame in Simon Cowell's Los Angeles office. Ethan gave it to him as a thank you gift. Beneath it, a small plaque reads, Heart matters more than perfection. Michael Miller, through his son Ethan. Share and subscribe, so this story will never be forgotten. Simon Cowell continued judging America's Got Talent. He continued giving harsh feedback when it was needed. He continued building his reputation as the judge who tells uncomfortable truths. But after that night, something changed. When young contestants walked onto that stage nervous and scared, Simon seemed to see them differently. To understand that sometimes courage matters more than talent. That sometimes keeping a promise is the greatest performance of all. Ethan made it to the finals of America's Got Talent. He didn't win the whole competition, that went to a dance group from Miami. But he won something more important. He kept his promise. He made his father proud. And he taught a legendary judge that even after 20 years, television can still surprise you. In the front row of every one of Ethan's performances, there was an empty seat. With a framed photo. Michael Miller, present in the only way that mattered. And Simon Cowell, who built a career on never standing during auditions, stood for every single one.